Da 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 da. Welcome back to disenFRIENDSchised, where we dissect Friends episodes one at a time and call out the grief that nobody names. I'm Karen Bulinski Mathison, founder of TheNakedGrief, published author with lived experience, years of education, and a grief coach. I am the host of disenFRIENDSchised, where we look at disenfranchised grief through the lens of friends. Now, if you're new here and you're like, wait, what is disenfranchised grief? It's everything other than death, the stuff that you don't get a casserole for, the stuff that's not always acknowledged by everyone else. But it is real grief. Today, we're looking at season 2, episode 4, the one with Phoebe's husband. The episode is actually a masterclass in quiet, complicated grief. Not the grief of death, but the grief of a chapter ending, the grief of what you hoped would happen, and the grief of realizing you were never going to be the person who could change someone. So this episode looks at two main characters, Phoebe and Rachel. We find out a secret about Phoebe, and we recognize and empathize with Rachel longing for the relationship that Ross is in with Julie. It's action-packed with disenfranchised grief because it's not just Phoebe, it's also Rachel grieving a what if, and the whole group spiraling into insecurity, exposure, and that messy thing people do when something tender shows up. They start throwing each other secrets like grenades. And yes, this episode's funny. There's a pigeon, there's Ross being Ross, and there's the group doing what groups do when they're uncomfortable, deflecting, joking, and exposing each other. But underneath the comedy is something real. Phoebe's facing a loss that doesn't come with casseroles, sympathy cards, or permission, because it's not a death. It's not even really a breakup. It's a divorce from a marriage that was never exactly what it looked like. So the episode starts with Rachel on the phone with her mom, trying to prove that she's fine living in the city, and then a pigeon flies into the apartment, and she kind of loses it a little bit. In the middle of the chaos, there's a knock on the door. Rachel's expecting it to be the guys, and it's a stranger, a blonde guy who's asking for Phoebe and casually says, tell her husband stopped by. This is the episode's first grief-adjacent moment. The way a single word can change the temperature of a room. Some words can do that. Husband, cancer, accident, we need to talk. So now there's the elephant in the room. Phoebe's married and nobody knew it. So Phoebe explains that Duncan is a Canadian ice dancer who thought he was gay, and she married him so he could get a green card. And Monica adds the detail that makes it hit. Phoebe actually had feelings for him, and when he left, she was crushed. So Phoebe's heart is enormous. She helps someone she cares about, and she pays an emotional price for it. This is what so many people do. They call it helping, but their nervous system calls it attachment. Monica basically says what everybody already knows. Phoebe liked Duncan, and when he left, Phoebe was crushed. Phoebe tries to play it off, but the truth is now out. This is one of those moments where grief gets exposed. Someone else names the thing you were trying not to say out loud. And once it's named, the nervous system does what it does. It looks for a way to get out of the tenderness. So the group starts spilling each other's secrets, and it escalates fast. Monica exposes how Phoebe felt about Duncan. Phoebe retaliates and reveals that the underwear on the telephone pole came from Monica having sex with Fun Bobby. Monica gets defensive and reveals that Chandler has 3 nipples. And everyone diverts to Chandler. Chandler deflects, and in defending himself, reveals that Joey was in a porno movie. And everybody's laughing, but everyone's also a little exposed and vulnerable. They all deflect to Joey for a minute, and then they go back to Chandler. It's funny because of the way the show is, but it's also real. When something tender shows up, people go chaotic. They joke, they deflect, they change the subject, They make it a bit. And underneath that, it's insecurity. It's don't look at my soft spot, look at yours. And that's grief adjacent too, because grief makes people feel vulnerable, and vulnerability makes people reach for control. So, further into the episode, Phoebe goes to meet Duncan, and she's thrilled, excited. She gets all dressed up. I think Monica or Rachel goes, "Oh, look at you, dressy dress." And they caution her, don't expect anything. So she meets Duncan, hoping that it's a good thing that he wants to see her, and he wants a divorce and explains he's met someone and that he's straight. This is where the grief gets layered. So Phoebe isn't just losing a relationship in whatever boundaries that looked like. She's losing the meaning that she had attached to it. Because if he's straight now, then what was their marriage? What was her role in his story? And what did she imagine she could have been to him? Phoebe has to face something brutal and human. She wasn't the woman who changed him into liking girls. Phoebe was never an option that way in his eyes. And this is a grief moment people rarely name. Grieving that you weren't enough to rewrite someone's identity, someone's choices, capacity, or future. And the coaching truth is, it was never her job. Meanwhile, we have Rachel. Rachel grieving Ross being with Julie. And she's decided that she wants to kind of stand in the way of Ross taking his relationship with Julie one step further. She tries to sabotage him having sex with Julie. So she keeps the gang at Ross's apartment way later than anybody wanted to stay, and gives Ross the advice of, no, women like to wait. They don't want to rush into sex. And when the night ends, Ross walks Rachel to the door, and she goes, so what you going to do? And he says, well, I talked to Joey after I talked to you, and his way, I get to have sex tonight. So Rachel is grieving a what if. She's grieving the version of her life where Ross chooses her. And instead of naming it, she tries to control the outcome. And that's a real grief behavior, control as a way to avoid feeling powerless. Ross goes inside and has sex with Julie twice. Rachel's left alone in the hallway with the reality that she didn't want. And this is the moment where avoidance stops working. Reality arrives anyway. So, disenfranchised grief, as it wasn't a real marriage in Phoebe's scenario. It was still a real loss. It can easily be minimized. And that's because Phoebe's pain was a marriage of citizenship and convenience. But Phoebe did it because she had feelings for Duncan. So her motives were deeper than just helping out a friend. A coaching opportunity for Phoebe would be to teach that grief is about attachment and meaning, not the paperwork behind it. Validating what she's feeling and letting her give herself the room that she needs to process, feel sad, and try and move forward through that. When grief ends a chapter, whether it's a divorce, a breakup, end of friendships, a job shift, any of that, it can hit different for everyone. In Phoebe's case, divorce here isn't just legal, it's symbolic. It's the end of a story that Phoebe carried. And it's compounded because it was her secret. Nobody knew she was married. Now that secret's out. So she actually has a support system to help her through this if she chooses. But she still has to come to terms with the fact that he didn't choose her in the end. And that's all real and valid. A coaching opportunity in Phoebe's case, again, is to normalize chapter grief. Endings that don't involve death but still change your identity. What does that look like for her? Asking her to express how she feels, having her resonate where everything's hitting. Is it the fact that everybody now knows that she helped Duncan out because she was hoping that more would come out of it in the long run? Is it that he's now straight and she wasn't chosen? Because it does layer up. And once you name what it is through that grief mess to really focus on, it can help in changing patterns and behaviors. Maybe Phoebe won't be the one that people lean on for that quote help anymore, where she has to make herself the less priority in her own chain of life events. The group's chaos and secret spilling is a shield. A coaching opportunity for the whole group is giving permission. Humor can be a coping tool as long as it doesn't become a permanent escape hatch. We see Chandler do this quite often. He uses his humor as an escape hatch in almost every episode. But also naming the shadow side. Exposure can be a way to regulate anxiety by making someone else a target. And that's not necessarily a healthy way to go. In the episode, it's funny. But in reality, that's where things can get viewed as not only defensiveness, but it can ruin friendships if you call out the wrong thing. People may be less forgiving to know that my underwear is on that telephone pole, as in Monica's case. Exposure like that can hurt a lot of relationships if you're not in control of how you are working and processing through your pain. Rachel tries to manage the outcome of her scenario because she can't tolerate the feeling of rejection, even though Ross doesn't know that Rachel is now interested in him. He's moved on and moved forward because he thought that it was never going to happen. And now he's happy. So a coaching opportunity for Rachel is teaching the difference between influence, which she tried to do, and manipulation, which she also tried to do. What she said at the end when he decided that he was going to go for it with Julie, Rachel actually pivoted and spoke from her heart and said some healthy pointers as to what she would have wanted if it was their intimate moment. You know, stroking the hair, leaning in slowly for that gentle kiss, and then just being in the moment. And I mean, he did it twice, so maybe some of what she said through it all resonated with him. But when she pivoted and became the friend, it made her more vulnerable to her own grief, but it also helped her shift into a more healthy way to process what she was feeling and to not ruin a friendship that she had with Ross, which may help further down the line in season 2. So, folks, if any of these characters really resonate in your own life, you can easily go back and rewatch these episodes, and with this new lens clearing, maybe you'll see that you really are a lot like so many of the characters. Have you ever found yourself as a placeholder in someone's life? Because you don't have to be the one who changes them to be someone who mattered. And if you're being honest, trying to be the one who changes someone is usually how we abandon ourselves. And if you found yourself being a placeholder in someone's life, how long have you let that role last? Did you recognize it and say, no, I'm good because they're a placeholder in my life too? Or did you change the relationship, or maybe gained a little bit more clarity and started looking at your patterns to stop falling for being a placeholder for people? And I'm not just talking about relationships of the romantic nature. Sometimes we become friends with people because of the commonalities that we share, and they're supposed to only be seasons and not lifetimes. So knowing when those seasons should end is healthy. Hanging on to those that are only supposed to be a season or a lesson can hinder our own life growth. So if you're grieving a relationship that didn't count on paper, or grieving the end of a chapter you never got to finish the way you wanted, you're not being dramatic, you're being human. And you're allowed to grieve what you hoped for, even if nobody else understands why it mattered. And at the disenfranchised and at the naked grief, we look at the disenfranchised grief. And not all grief comes from death. Job loss, career pivots, divorce, breakups, empty nests, moving, identity shifts, friendships ending, the loss of the life you thought you'd have. We offer support communities that meet you where you are without pressure, toxic positivity, or having to explain why it hurts. And one of the things that I personally created is a way to make handling your own grief situations affordable and at your own pace and on your own time frame. Because let's face it, grief is painful enough. It does not need to be painful on the pocket too. And what you'll find at the Naked Grief is private, judgment-free space to process what's changed, practical tools, prompts, and guidance that you can use right away, multiple styles of support so you can choose what fits and switch if you need to, a path to find your footing, one small step at a time. If you're not ready for therapy or one-on-one coaching yet, but you know you need something, you're in the right place at the Naked Grief. There's lots of free resources, downloads, ebooks, and community support. So tune in next week for season 2, episode 5, the one with 5 steaks and an eggplant. Until then, da 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 da